Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. A little bit of a technical difficulty with it this evening. Just saying, I was due after getting 30 right. I was definitely going to mess one of them up. So apologies for that. Um, and I guess this is our fourth session we've had now. We had a little break last week with a coaches meeting. It's our fourth session we've done. This evening we've got WarrenTaylor. Many of you may know Warren already. Had a long history with the Broncos, most notably coaching the championship women's team. Was it 3 titles in 3 years, Warren?
3 seasons, yeah.
3 seasons, yeah. Good hit rate. So wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of team culture and ways to build it and things like that. So I'll throw over to you, Warren, to get started. Hopefully everyone can see the shared screen there. What about that? Perfect.
All right, thanks, mate. Alrighty, I'll see how we go kicking off. So thanks, everyone. My little topic tonight is around team culture. I'll touch on a few different things tonight, and I'll try and get through them as best I can, as quick as I can. But feel free to yell out and talk over me and ask questions if you have any questions. That's fine. So certainly not confessing to be the arbiter of all things team culture, but I've had a reasonable success in this sort of area for a long time. So hopefully there's some bits and pieces in tonight that will help some of you on your way. So I'll sort of jump in as best I can. Righto. So first things first. What is? Sorry. Oh no. Yep. Okay. So what is the right culture? I guess in its simplest form, there's a lot of different versions, but in its simplest form, I suppose it's how we behave on this team. And you're talking about behaviour, you're talking about conduct, and you're talking about building that vehicle that's going to get you where you want to get to. So it depends on a lot of things. But in here, what I'm really going to talk about is around that team culture and cover that off as I go. So first of all, it's a shared mindset. You've got to have everybody engaged, everybody invested. So depending on what your team looks like, I mean, it says it goes without saying that everybody's got to be on the same page. So things like pulling together in the same direction. So we've all had teams that we've probably had a handful of kids doing one thing and a handful of kids doing something else. So really, what you're trying to do is build that environment that is going to get around that, I suppose, and address that. So you got to ask, what is your goal and what does success mean to you? I think I heard a lot of good examples of what success means to different coaches in Glenn's talk a couple of weeks ago. Some things like, obviously the things around that all the kids have improved. And one, I remember somebody saying that all the kids want to come back. That's a really good one. So you might decide that your goals or your version of success is different. And it'll change between domestic and between rep and between whatever it needs to be. The point here is that it's got to be team specific. So I can't say that I'm this kind of coach. Therefore, our version of success is that all of my players must mold into exactly what I'm trying to do. That might be part of it, definitely. And it also can't be individualized. So if you try and say, well, our version of success is that Tom needs to get from here to here and Harry needs to get from here to here, well, then you're going to break down. It's going to be too much for you. So you need to just find what it is that your group is going to help. What is going to help your group get from point A to point B, whatever point B looks like for you. So you all have your own values, and I'll talk a bit about my values tonight and about how we got to those. But you've also got some great director of coaching coordinators and mentors around the club to fall on and call on in this area as well. So by all means, you've got your own beliefs and attitudes and values, and they are really important to what you need to do as your team. So for me, attitudes, beliefs and values. So, at domestic level, it might be participation, it might be enjoyment, it might be fostering that love of the game, it could be winning. Things like that. It's certainly the lower age groups at domestic, when that kid who couldn't reach the ring suddenly makes their first basket. They're the rewarding moments that you've got to consider. Well, what am I trying to build here? What am I trying to create as what my version of success is? You know, you think about everything from those types of moments and those types of memories, I guess, to right through to, well, I want to take this team from, you know, they finished third last year, we want to win next year or whatever it might be. So for me, at rep level, winning has to be a part of it. I've always tried to convey that learning how to win is no different to understanding offensive structure or understanding a defensive mindset when it comes to a learned skill. So, you know, and we'll talk a bit about that a little bit later in roles and attitudes, but certainly it's an important part of that rep level structure and rep level belief system. At the end of the day, no matter what it is, it's got to be reachable and it's got to be something that everybody can buy into. So think about the kids you've got, think about the group you've got, and you know, you'll know where you land realistically, and hopefully there's some points tonight to come up with it. If you can see that picture, that's the picture I wanted to. I don't know if anyone can see it. I asked BigV to put that on my coach's pass a couple of years ago, and they refused, which is I was a bit disappointed about that. But this is pretty much what would I know about this sort of stuff? So I guess this is just a quick screen to say I've been doing it for a long time, and you know, I've been lucky enough to have, you know, quite a bit of success at Broady over the journey and at a couple of other clubs as well. And my point really here is that it would be just really easy when most of you probably remember the teams that I've been able to coach, and so easy to put that success down to the elite level athletes that I've been lucky enough to coach, and people like Shuz and Frog and Colleen and these just superstars that have, you know, that are Hall of Famers at our club. But at the end of the day, you've really got to refuse to believe that if we didn't create a culture that catered for those players and the whole team to be able to grow together and row that boat together in the same direction, then we would have ended up being just another one of those teams, or a couple of those teams that had great players, looked great on paper, but just couldn't get it done when the actual goal was there in front of them. So our goal obviously was at state champ level was success, was to win the banner. And we played against some really talented teams, really great teams. But those teams, and Glenn will attest, you know, the Waverley teams and the Ringwood teams that we were up against, fantastic teams, but they don't have the banners that we have, because at the end of the day, when push came to shove, we probably just had that better bond and a better culture and a better club, you know, support and those things. So, you know, for us, that level of success was, or the argument about success was to win. No matter what your level of success is, it's around, you know, the culture will help you achieve that. So this is probably a bigger part of the talk, but it's around building your values. These are my values. So I'll say this much: my coaching philosophy has changed. I've been doing it for, you know, as I said, 30 years. The coaching philosophy has changed. I probably started out doing under 18s and whatnot back in the 90s, and it was, you know, probably a lot of zone and a lot of structured stuff. And, you know, as I sit here today, I'm probably a much more a man coach and you know, with change ups, and, you know, the philosophy stuff changes. It changes with times. It changes with how basketball changes. That's fine. But these values have been the same for at least the last 20 years of my coaching. They might have been called something different early, but essentially attitude, commitment, and effort are the three things that basically I've called my values. And from a senior point of view, these are the three things that a player needs to tick the box before they can really even play. So what I want to talk about now is what they mean. What they mean from before the season, I guess, is what you want to have. You want to have these things in your players, preferably before you even select them. But then you need to maintain that over the course of the season. So they might sound self-explanatory, and mostly they are. So I'll try and touch on them a little bit. So attitude is the most important one. I'll speak longer on attitude than the other two. So there's some dot points there that are pretty basic, and I think we've all been in situations where some of these things just haven't been evident right in front of us as coaches. So, I mean, the first point is, you know, if a player isn't enjoying themselves, then to me, they shouldn't be there. And there's a couple of people in here that I know will attest. I've never, certainly at senior level, when a player comes to me and says, look, I don't want to play here anymore, I want to consider other options or whatever, I've never once tried to twist that player's arm. I think a lot of players expect the coach to then go, well, let's sit down and see if we can change your mind and see what the issue is. I've always trusted that at that point, that player has already thought about it long enough that there's nothing I can do at this stage to make them enjoy just by having another chat without necessarily promising something I can't deliver. So to be true to my values and to be true to the program, I've quite commonly, quite openly, and it's cost me some good players over the journey, no question. But I'm not going to try and convince someone that they're enjoying something when perhaps they're not. The next couple of points are the core of it. Really, it's about we before me. It's about team first. The attitude stuff needs to be around the ability to, and I will say, establish this value, maintain this value, but it's a really hard one. If you've got the opportunity to, certainly at senior level, if you've got the opportunity to select players that have got this already, then it makes a hell of a difference. It makes life so much easier that if you've got a player who is already got that mindset around being the best teammate they can be. And I've always looked at people and gone, well, what do you want your teammates to be like to you? And what are you going to do then to be like that for your teammates? So certainly at junior level, that's one way I've always addressed it a little bit. And it doesn't matter how you sell this, but it's team first all the way. And it's everything from, if you consider it, right from your leadership kids or your stronger sort of personalities, recognizing when one of your other players, your quieter players, is probably being excluded from a group dynamic, might be on court, off court training, might be on a tournament, anything. If those kids recognize that someone's not really fitting in and actually doing what they need to do to bring them into the fold, it could be everything from that. That's a big step, right through to simply just making that extra pass. So the easy thing for us, I suppose, is, when we look at our teams and we recruit our kids or try out our kids or whatever, are they willing to make the extra pass? Are they willing to, or are they more inclined to ignore that open player and try and cross back and take it to the basket and take on the defense? And, what kind of player are you looking at there? Tryouts are really difficult to see that in such a short amount of time, which is why, for me, tryouts, a lot of my tryouts are less about the skill stuff and more about let's give you some really basic structure and see how quickly you pick it up. Because then I'm looking for how quickly you pick it up, but I'm also looking for how quickly you can read and find someone else that's open and give up maybe something of your spotlight to let someone else, make that play. The desire to learn. So that's an easy one. You don't want, I've probably just touched on it. Those kids that think they know it all or whatever it might be versus the kids that are just sponges, just really want to be there. And then the ability to remain focused and positive in moments of adversity. I'll give you one little tip that I've used, and I didn't really think it was going to be great, but it's turned out to be quite a good one for kids who, drop their heads and they struggle a bit with that adversity, is the center line. I don't know how many of you have heard, have used this yourselves, but, certainly junior girls and senior women that I've had, they'll make a mistake or two back-to-back mistakes and they'll carry it for too many plays, way too many plays. So to me, it's about getting them aside and saying, well, every time you cross that center line, it's a new game. So you might make a mistake in offense. So run back, brush it off, center line, defensive mindset, everything else is history. You're just breaking the game down to see if we can knock those mistakes out of their mind. Make a mistake on defense, silly foul, give up a basket, bust your lane, halfway line, new game. So little things like that about getting around adversity. I was going to talk a little bit about the 2014 season, but I'll leave that out. There was a fair bit of adversity in there, but we all know what that means. And the ability for kids to stay focused and positive, and the ability for you to have a program and a culture that allows them to do that is really important. I will say, certainly from a senior point of view, and I know this does work in juniors as well, and I'll come back to it a bit later, but how do you know whether a kid's got the right attitude before selection? Well, I'll say, often meeting the parents, knowing the parents, meeting the kid, talking to the parents can actually be just as valuable, if not more valuable, than what you see on a tryout court. So that's a really important part of it. Don't just select kids from tryouts based on what you see on the court. Take your time to meet the parents and just have a quick chat, find out a little bit about the kid, see how they react. You'll get a feel really quickly for whether they are my kids the world, they should play 40 minutes versus, we're really excited about being part of something special. In season, you'll find out pretty quick. Every early season, when you're better players, or any player really, when your players sub off, don't have your back turned. Have a look at them. Find out whether they are talking to their replacement with, this is what, this is who you're playing on, this is what they're doing, they're slashing and they're driving, whatever it might be, or are they looking up at the clock? You'll find out really quick whether these kids have got that sort of stuff. So attitude to me is a really big one. Commitment is, everyone will hear commitment and think being at training. Well, yeah, absolutely. It's hard. It's probably different these days with a lot of stuff that families have got on to demand that 100% attendance, but you've still got to try. You've still got to have a crack and make it clear that you've really got to have all the kids at training all the time. To me, the only time you won't come to training is if you've got something that's contagious. If you're injured, you're there. And I'm sure everyone in this group is the same. Because, to me, I can do 100 million things with these kids if I've got them all at training. So I get that probably in the later years, and certainly the last couple of years at a smaller Division 2 club, you kind of had to be a little bit lenient because people have got a lot of things on, but it really affects you. It really affects you. So to me, I'm still demanding it best I can because our kids suffer when a few kids miss. But commitment, when I'm talking to the group about it, and I'll talk about the team meeting later, which is really important, it's about that commitment to what we're doing as well. So it's commitment not just to being at the sessions, but it's also to our structures, our sets, our defensive philosophy. It's about being committed to what we're trying to do. If you've got a couple of kids there that are coming to every training, but they just don't want to be a part of, they don't want to play this part of the offense, or they don't want to play that type of defense, that's setting up for a long year. You need to address that really early, and you need to get everybody on board with what you're trying to do. So to me, that comes right at the start when I'm putting my values forward to the group. This is what we need from your kids. This is what we need from all of you as players. So, things like, if you've got a big kid there and you want to be a fast transition team and you've got a couple of bigs that you need and they're not really pumped about being part of a team that's, it's going to run up and down the floor and they don't think they fit or they don't think they're of value, well, you've got to be able to convince them that, the heat's going to go to this game and you're going to come into your own. And, you've got to be in that positive reinforcement frame of mind and have that ability to say, well, look, just because our overall philosophy means this, it doesn't mean you're not a part of that. It's really, really big. Your teammates, the kids you've got as a group will help greatly with sort of enforcing that commitment sort of part of it, I guess. Effort's a no-brainer. This is one where you could ask your kids, what do you think effort means? And they'll get it right. They'll know that means putting in 110% of the time. We've talked about it since day dot. There's really no need to explain it, but it's something that really needs to be called out. I've had players who have tried to be really crafty. I've inherited teams where I've had players who have been a little bit crafty about trying to hide the fact that they're probably a bit lazy and trying to get around things and cut some corners. I've had players a couple of years ago at Broady who would wait for a drill that was like a line drill, a progressive drill, and repetition drill, and I'd notice that we tying up their shoelaces and waving people through. So they'd only do 5 or 6 repetitions. Everyone else would do 10 or 11 or whatever it might be. And then when you look a bit closer, you realise they're actually untying their shoelaces so they can tie them up again. So we'd stop the clock. Pretty straightforward, and try and get them back on track. So you need to be keeping your eye on kids who are going to take their foot off the pedal. Kids buying into this, then it will usually it'll usually help when they'll usually help bond all the other kids back into what you're after. So they're my values: attitude, commitment, effort. I'm sure there've been different names over the journey, and a former assistant coach of mine when I had an under 14 team from Broady that went to the Nationals back in 2003, John Lippens, rest in peace, worked out that attitude, commitment, and effort can spell ACE. So we've always sort of planted ACE over the top of my paperwork and the stuff that kids are usually getting. So again, they're made really clear to everybody before I'm recruiting that these are my values and you need to buy into these before I'll even worry about whether you can pass, shoot, dribble, anything. The good example, I think, that I want to say here is about meeting those people first. I I'll tell you now, and people probably, I've told this before, people haven't really believed me because they've seen how good she is, but I knew Colleen Planetta was the player I wanted to recruit to Broadmeadows, not after seeing her game tape. It was after probably the third Skype meeting I had with her, where her mum and dad basically pushed her out of the way and sat down on the couch in front of Skype with their dog and talked to me for about half an hour. It was, and Colleen came back on, and she can tell you this, but that was when I said, I'm not recruiting anyone else. You're the player, because that was the moment you saw she was a great person, amazing personality, comes from a fantastic family, was driven, focused, all of those attributes that I knew were going to make the culture of our program better, regardless of whether she was going to put up the numbers that she ended up putting up. That was a bonus, and I'm glad she said yes. Obviously, we all are. But in reality, she was selected more on realistically who she was than what she could bring. And that's fact. Very glad she said yes. Before I move on, that's values. I'm watching that clock, Todd, but that's the values part of it. I've got a bit to go about other bits and pieces. Is there any questions that people want to ask me or want to bring up in the group about values at this point?
I think I've said it so people can unmute themselves or put in the chat, but that our time is probably running a bit late because I heavily delayed us, so don't stress.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll move on, and we'll see if there's any questions at the end. That's fine, no problems at all. Righto, so I loosely call this bit about accountabilities, but I'm going to talk a little bit about roles. When I say roles, it's the roles of your players and understanding, and really important to me has been team rules. So really the next few things are just things that I found really important and things that I do again every time. And I'll say this, which is not really written on the slides so much, but honesty and communication are your two best friends. Be upfront, honest, brutally honest. I've been honest to my detriment at times, but it's been my saviour most of the time. So when we talk about these things, it'll make sense when I talk about the team meeting, the pre-season meeting. But these are really important elements of what I've had in my programs over the journey, seniors and juniors all the time. So balancing your competing objectives, that really just means what are you trying to achieve? If you build that idea that we talked about earlier, that belief of what success means to you, well, most of us are going to be racked a little bit with a competing objective between how we're going to win this season and keep everybody on song and everybody invested and buying into what we're trying to achieve, when we know that to win the season might mean not everyone's going to play the same amount of minutes. That's probably the best example of that. We want to run this kind of play, this kind of structure. It's not going to suit every kid. So how am I going to make sure that I can balance these things? So to me, it's not about being equal necessarily at rep. It's about being fair. If I'm going to talk about equal, when I'm coaching domestic, I don't care whether I've got a rep kid who's played 6 years of rep and a kid who's in their first season. They play even minutes for me when I'm coaching domestic. That's my way of doing it. To me, my arguments in my idea of success in domestic is more often than not fostering the love of the game, building that enjoyment, the participation of it, and building a culture and a team based on more equality. Whereas at rep and at seniors, it's not about equality as much as it's about being fair. And when I say fair, it's not about necessarily fair by individual player, but fair to the team. What's fair to the team? If you've got the right kids with the right attitude and the right commitment and the right effort, they'll understand that fair might mean I don't play as much as she plays, or I don't play as much as he plays, and my role is this and his role is something quite different. The US high school system is can often be very structured. These kids are our shooters, these kids are our rebounders, these kids set screens, and if you're not a shooter, your job might be, you might really know your job is to get that ball to the shooter. It might be that, but we don't do it that way so much. We want everybody to have the opportunity to be involved in every part of it. But to be successful, really a lot of the time we all understand, certainly at rep level, we need to empower kids to have a role and excel in that role and understand that what they're doing is of this much importance to our overall success. Not an easy thing to do. Again, be honest right up front, right off the bat. Be brutally honest. Be open and communicate with your kids, with their parents about what you see this as being. I've had players who certainly at senior level, where I've known that my probably 7, 8, 9, 10 aren't going to play a lot. Well, I've been, probably over the top almost pre-season, making sure I have those meetings with those players and saying, look, this is what you're buying into. You won't play the minutes of the others probably, but we're about building something successful here and something exciting and something great. If you want to be a part of that, this is the offer, that this is the role that I'm offering. And I talk about roles, never talk about minutes, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So fair treatment is not equal treatment, but if your cultural base is solid, your players will get that. So the hardest part in that whole bracket is the parents' expectations. We're all going to have parents who want their kid to play more minutes than they play, or want their kid to have a bigger role than they have, and all those sort of things. And I'll be honest, it's probably one of the reasons I've been coaching seniors for the last few years. This was always a challenge. Something was never much fun, I guess, but I probably felt like I had a good handle on it because, as I said, and I'll say it again, that honesty is key. So I don't ever promise anything. So I think one of the biggest mistakes a coach can make is promising. So to me, I'll stand in front of my group at the start of the season, and and regardless of whether I've got a Sharon Milner or a Katrina Hibbert on the floor, I will say to the whole group that not one person in this team is guaranteed 1 second of playing time. No one. It'll all depend on way too many things. So it's about being really clear, really honest at the start. People can believe you or not, but at least you've said it. You can't be held back then for not, for making a promise that you then can't live up to. So that's really important to do that. How do they get those opportunities? Well, they're going to earn it. You're going to talk to them about attitude, commitment, effort. You can talk to them about work ethic. You're going to talk to them about, their skill sets versus other skill sets and how they fit to your structure. But it still doesn't add up to a guarantee. Just because you are this player and someone else is that player doesn't mean we aren't going to be in a situation where things are going to change. So that's really important to be upfront and honest. Always coach the floor, not the bench. It's a great thing I learned years and years ago. Don't look down your bench and go, oh, so-and-so's been sitting for too long. I better get him back on. If the team on the floor is playing well, then you've got to start from there. But when I'm talking to parents, this is probably a good, reasonable tip, I think. When I'm talking to parents about why minutes might be different and not meet their expectations, I find it really interesting that we've always sort of told coaches things like, well, challenge the player to say, well, who are you, who do I take off to put you on? And I think you get into a bit of a mess with things like that. I hate for coaches and young coaches especially to get into that argument with a parent where, my kid scored this many points and took, got this many rebounds, and you get sort of stuck going, well, yeah, but I wanted to give someone else an opportunity to, I think a lot of things hurt rather than help sometimes if you get caught. So a tip that I've always used is to take it away from the individual kids. Don't talk about those individual kids. Talk about your team strategy, your game strategy. Look the parents in the face and the players in the face, and I've done this countless times, and talk about, well, I will substitute based on what I need to do at that moment in time to get us an advantage or disrupt the disadvantage, to speed us up, to slow the other team down, whatever that might be, to get us more threes, more rebounds, whatever it might be. And you know what? A lot of the time, that means that a kid who's actually playing quite well might need to come off at that point in time. Doesn't mean they're playing poorly, doesn't mean they won't go back on, but I might need to make a sub. If we've got a bunch of guards on the floor and the other team goes big, suddenly with we're not getting our rebounds, I might need to take off a kid who's actually playing quite well at the time, if they're all playing well, but just to change the momentum, change the structure, change what we're doing, or it might even be to get a step ahead. And we've certainly done that at state championship level. We've made, been successful over the journey by making some rotations and things when you can sort of see things starting to go a certain way. Well, let's jump the curve. Let's make a sub now, make a change, and try and disrupt the other team from their momentum before they get it. So I talk to parents about that. I talk to kids about that. I'll substitute based on things that really are not necessarily in your hands, but they're not even really in my hands. I might need to make a big decision, and it might just change the look of our team. Doesn't mean anyone's done anything wrong. So again, there's no promises. So the part for this is there's no promises, just an opportunity to be considered. How do they get considered? Well, attitude, commitment, effort, work ethic, etc. bench impact. I like to say to kids, well, I know what you can do as a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, but what kind of 6 are you? I really need to know that you're invested in the game, that when you come off the floor, you don't cross your arms, sulk back in your chair. You need to be up and about. And I want my kids to be MVPs in, and you've all heard this probably, but towel waving and high-fiving, it's a really important skill that we don't teach. You know, it's a fantastic thing when you've got your bench up and about. And if any of you have seen the Monmouth Hawks on YouTube, if you haven't, go and Google them. Their bench game is huge. Basically, it's a good thing to show your players. But certainly if you see poor behaviour or just slumping sort of body language and stuff on the bench, you need to address it pretty quick. Quickly, attitude to practice. I'll push onto that one a little bit. This is a hard one because you just really need to try and build an environment that is your kids enjoy coming to training. They're going to get something out of it. They're going to enjoy being there. And we talked a little bit before about the attendance argument, but you know, it's about that running between drills and all that sort of stuff. We need to have that happen, but we also need to make sure your players are up and about, and you know, that the training levels are high, because if you've got kids there that just want to, you know, they just feel like they have to get through training to just because we only want to play. We have to go to training just to get through it. Yeah, it'll drag. We know that it drags everyone down. So, you know, I've never been one for necessarily. You've got to balance. I'll put it this way: you've got to balance that repetition. I know Glenn's better about, you know, trying to change things up at a lot of different trainings and keep things fresh and new. I've tried to always balance that with our core drills that we do all the time. You've got to have a few core drills that suit what you run, suit what your group does, suit what your pursuit of that success is, and try and mold in some different things or change up those drills here and there as best you can, just to keep things a little bit fresh. To me, the most important part for me, certainly at senior level, and I've done it at under 18s as well, is if our second training in the week is a Thursday night, we've always challenged our teams to make that last scrimmage on a Thursday night the toughest, highest, most disruptive, most just high pressure game of basketball that you'll play in that week. So, and it should be, because the team you're playing against knows all your sets. The defensive team knows exactly how you're going to run them, and the offensive team knows exactly how you're going to defend them. So it should force your players to think through stuff, no question. But the physicality and the effort needs to be there, so that you'll find a lot of times you'll get to Friday night or on the weekend, and the team won't be pressuring you as much as you pressured yourselves, and your players can start to lift up a little bit and get through some stuff. So I think attitude to practice is really important. Any questions about practice or the role stuff? Or we'll just kick on. All right, so I don't think you might not be able to see that team rules thing. It wasn't really necessarily there it's just there to refer to a little bit. But a set of team rules is just a necessity. And that one on the page is very detailed, I think, but you could have 4 or 5 different points, and that's your team rules. And I'll talk about that a little bit. So I'd like to think that the success that I've had over the journey has been more along the lines of, I'm a pretty disciplined coach, and this stuff probably holds a higher priority for me than it's held for, you know, some other coaches that I've met along the way. But you can't have that level of success unless there's a level of discipline, and you can't have discipline without a framework. So I used to say things like establish the rules and enforce the rules. All I really mean was that you have to have a set of rules, no matter what they look like. And then secondly, you have to enforce them fairly and, you know, and consistently. You can't run without them. And if you run with rules and then you don't enforce them, you get yourselves into a really big problem. And probably the worst part of the even worse step from that is if you have a set of rules and then you enforce them differently for some kids and for others, then you're getting yourself into a bigger problem again. Probably one of the biggest problems you can make. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have some type of team rules, and then have an opportunity, which I'll talk about in a moment, about how you go about addressing those and how you go about enforcing them so that the kids understand that they're all even and they're all fair and it's working in their favour towards your goal. You'll notice at the bottom of that, I make players sign up certainly at seniors. A bit of bluff doesn't mean a hell of a lot, but I have had player discussions over the journey where they've stepped out of line and I've had to sit them down, which I'll mention in a moment, where I've started off with, is this your signature? And there's that saying that you understand the team rules. So it's not a bad place to start from. Consider your leaders when you're putting them together. I'll talk about leadership next, but it's their team. So you want them to have some say in the rules, not all the say. They won't know everything they really need, obviously, but it's pretty good, and you'll get more investment if you can involve the players in what it means to them to be, to have that level of success and to have a good culture and a good team. You put it back on some of your leaders and say, well, what do you think is important? They'll always come up with being early to training, early to games and all that sort of stuff, which is great. Let them say those things and put them in place. They're much more likely to be invested and stick to them if they've had a role in making the point. And then I've had, certainly at seniors, I've had leadership groups who I've then involved in the penalty side of it. I think from a coaching point of view, it's been a bit easier for me to deal with the big things, suspending players or whatever it might be, but minor infractions, it's been good to let the playing group have their leaders, work out what needs to be done a lot of the time. Now, the most important thing amongst all this, which I'll speak about in a minute, is setting the foundations, and you do that through an early team meeting. But again, no matter where you do it and how you do it, honest, open communication, really, really important. I have a point of social media in my team rules now, and everyone should. There's BV rules and there'll be club rules, I'm sure, and all the rest of it, codes of conduct. But I'll give you a couple of points really quickly that you can use to your players. One is about being inclusive. Social media can be really dangerous about excluding kids. The other one is the obvious one that they'll know about, which is being appropriate versus inappropriate. I had a team a couple of years ago that had a messenger chat group. They called it a team group, but as it turned out, not every player in the team was in that group. It was only because we had a pretty good culture that a couple of girls that were involved in it brought it to my attention to go, well, this is not right. We don't like this. So the group was sort of squashed, and I think they did create another group with had everybody in it, which was fine. You don't want cliques, you don't want divisions, and things like that can cause it. You can't stop your players from having their own little groups of friends, but certainly if it looks like it's a team thing, you certainly have the right to step in and do something about it. Kids will obviously have their own Facebooks and Snapchats and Instagrams and whatever. And I'll give you one example about inappropriate that was really probably speaks to a culture again, probably the same sort of thing. After a country league game a couple of years ago where we beat the top team, one of our players posted a Snapchat on her Snapchat stories of one of her teammates, and the line that she put on it was, and forgive me, but it said suck shit and then the name of the team that we beat. I was probably, and I didn't see it, I didn't have any of that access. So I was probably only 15 minutes away from the stadium when I had 2 phone calls from 2 players who alerted me to the fact and sent me the photo, which spoke to me about what a good culture we had, because the players weren't prepared to cop that. So we'd obviously, to me, I said, well, we're obviously doing something right. Players understand that that's damaging. It was a young player. She was a 16-year-old in our team, and she probably felt she was being, a bit funny, but it wasn't acceptable. And as it turned out, that following Tuesday night, we had a chat with her and her mum, and she missed the next game out of a suspension. And it was really more so that it sent us such a strong message when I was able to sit down to her and go, look, it wasn't me seeing this. It was your teammates that saw this and didn't accept it. So from a cultural point of view, I thought it was really handy, really valuable. So to point those things out really early is great. Another good photo. That's wherever she is. That's Tamara. She's a good friend. We've laughed about that photo quite a bit. And then I went looking for a photo where I was having fun with refs and I couldn't find one. Go figure. So I've put a photo down there of a couple of two different teams showing a bit of sportsmanship. To me, the sportsmanship respect argument, just a couple of quick points. Live ball, dead ball. If the ball's live, you want your players to be ruthless. You want them to be uncompromising, tough. Dead ball, player on the ground, other team, teach your players to pick them up. Teach your players to pat someone on the back. Try and teach them the difference between that white line fever thing. Live ball, dead ball. If you'll be surprised at what the difference it makes to your group. How do you maintain this? It's really hard. Your team rules really have to speak to what you regard as respect and what you regard as sportsmanship in a way. I'm a big fan of positive reinforcement. I actually like the idea, certainly at juniors, of maybe having an award where your players all vote for, you know, who was the most sportsmanlike in that game. And at the end of the season, they get something that's voted by their teammates, as, you know, and it might just encourage players to be a little bit more respectful of their opponents and referees and all the rest of it. Really important. All right. Home stretch. Just some thinking points, things I've done and I've found effective over the journey. So an early season tournament. So for juniors, I'm not sure what the process is at Broady, whether there's any mandated stuff. I haven't been back long enough to know yet, but I had teams where I would make sure that we would always, almost as soon as we picked a team, we would make sure we're booked in for a Southern Pen tournament or a Shepparton tournament or whatever they were in November, a November tournament. Great opportunity. Get your team away, give them an opportunity to bond a little bit when they're away from home and away from other distractions. Get them to put their phones away if you can do it. Harder, easier said than done. And spend a weekend together. It's really, really valuable. I think it's a fantastic thing to do. Even you know, Bendigo Altham or Bendigo tournament, for example, or, you know, Adelaide at Easter, Ballarat in the middle of the year. Doesn't mean you can't do it in the middle of the year, but I'm really talking about how valuable it is early in the season to be able to get your team away and get them talking to each other and learning about each other. Great opportunity to set standards. I love the idea of getting to Southern Pen tournament and having an opportunity to look really closely at probably my better players and look for an opportunity where they didn't do something right and bench them, come down hard on them, show the rest of the team that, you know, no one's outside rules, everyone's up to the same thing. And in fairness to everybody, you get to actually police that a little bit in a game that doesn't have the consequences of, say, the following Friday night when it might be a grading game where you might not be as keen to pull that good player off. So it's a good chance to set those standards. I know that most Southern Pen tournaments, there was at least one time where I would throw the whiteboard and try and scare everybody into thinking that I'm a really nasty person so that they would pull their heads in a little bit. There was at least one time where I forgot I had magnets on the board and they just exploded all over the court, and I had a couple of players coming up to me with all these magnets afterwards. So probably didn't have the effect it was supposed to have, but it was worth a try. I don't pick leaders until that tournament. I try and get an opportunity, use that weekend as an opportunity. And I'll talk about leaders in a moment. But if you're thinking about picking captains or leaders or whatever you want to do, which I'll talk about, I think that tournament's a really good opportunity to have a look for who might be the right person. So on that, you want everyone to be a leader on your team, but you know naturally that's not going to be the case. You've got to try and pick out who will be those leaders and who will be natural leaders, and then you're going to have natural influencers as well. Influencers don't necessarily lead, but they certainly can have a great, real say over how the rest of the group goes. So it's really important to sort of work out who's who in the zoo and know who's going to do what for your group and keep a bit of an eye on it realistically. We always chose our captains from what we saw at the tournament based on who was leading, who was influencing. And I'm sure, Glenn, this was something that you taught me a long time ago. Sorry if it isn't, but if you've got a good leader that is your captain and a good fun, I would call an influencer that could be part of that leadership group as a vice captain or whatever, it made for a great dynamic and it made for a really strong season. I'm pretty sure that was a Glennism from years gone by. Another thing that we've done, and just an idea for everybody, is that in 2013 at state champ level, we had a really strong team, chock full of leaders. It was a team with Shaz Frog, Yinka, a lot of Jacinta Scott. We had a lot of experienced players with good leadership skills. So we decided, and really this one come from Shaz more than anything, that we would name a captain every Thursday night based on who trained the hardest and the best over the week. So every Thursday night we'd come together at the end of the session and go, right, this week it is, Gemma Wright or whoever, Darren McPherson, whatever it might be, based on how they trained. We made sure that the role had some real importance and it was on a bit of a pedestal, which was really good. And we had a different captain every week. And if it was an 8th or 9th player, well, then they started that week. And we were lucky we had a really strong team and it probably didn't change too much realistically from a successful point of view, but it certainly empowered the group and it certainly made for some really strong trainings and really good scrimmages. Really quickly, player discussions. And I'm not talking about the coaching chats in the middle of training, just point this out, point that out. I'm talking about player has broken team rule, player has stepped outside of standards or whatever. We need to sit down and have a chat. So a couple of things about that. They need to be timely. So don't leave it for 2 weeks and go through 3 more trainings before you talk to the kid. Never on a game night. I know we all know this a little bit, but you need to say this early season to your parents. Don't come and talk to me on a game night about your kids' minutes or whatever it might be. Your game prep and game review is sacrosanct, really. So game night is about the team. You need to make sure it's really clear in your expectations and your rules and wherever else you might be able to put that, but not on a game night. Anyone under 18, parents present. I'm actually the other way when it comes to seniors. The minute you turn 18, I don't want your parents involved in me talking to you. You need to take a responsibility for your position and your situation in this. Be accountable, be an adult, be mature. But under 18, yes, parents involved, parents present. Don't talk to a kid without their parent present. That's a Monty. I would also have an assistant coach or another parent present as well. Would never talk, certainly never have a sensitive talk with a kid one-on-one, never ever. So that's really important. Where are we? Give them forewarning, so don't surprise them. Don't wait till you've finished training on a Tuesday night and then grab the kid and parent and go, oh, can we have 15 minutes? I need to talk to you about what, your kid come off the court and kicked the water ball the other night. Let's have a chat. Not fair on the kid, not fair on the parent. Tell them, send them a text on the Saturday or something and say, look, before training on Sunday or Monday or Tuesday, can you come 15, 20 minutes early? We need to have a quick chat about the game. That's it. Give them a chance. Make it before training. You can imagine if you make it after training, they're going to train like a dog right through and it's going to affect the rest of the group. So if you can, player makes a mistake Friday night, leave it Friday night, tell the parents I'll talk to them about it later, send them a text or ring them up over the weekend and say, like, before our next training, can we have a 15, 20-minute chat and we'll cut it and we'll work it all out. That's really important part of that. Righto, this is hopefully on. I know we're running very long. Sorry, Todd. So the start of the season meeting, I've made a point of mentioning a couple of times, is super important. And it's probably the most important way to ensure that you build and establish that culture. If you don't do this and hope that you can give them some stuff or put some stuff on Facebook and people will get it and they'll work it out and stuff, you're really hanging yourself out to dry. You need to have an opportunity where you can look people in the eye, kids and parents, be blunt, be brutal, be straightforward with everybody, and so and give them the opportunity to ask questions and give you feedback, and then it's all out in the open. It's really important. I can't emphasize it enough. It's a mandatory meeting. If a kid can't make it for whatever reason, find another night. You've really got to have everybody there. Okay, so expectations. It's harder every year to have expectations of kids and parents. People have got so much on. We understand that. But my expectations, certainly in senior level, are just completely non-negotiable. These are what we want you to do. Things like conduct, adhering to your values, understanding, not breaking the team rules, how they communicate with you as a coach, non-negotiable. Absolutely must, and you've got to be able to do that. This is your opportunity to lay out those values and accountabilities. Now, imagine that. So for seniors, I might have those talks before I recruit someone. And then once we've recruited and picked our team, we'll have another one of these talks where I'll reiterate it. So juniors, it might be a similar thing where before tryouts, you'll say it to the group on the court. These are the things that you have to tick. These are the boxes you have to tick before we even worry about whether you're going to get a game here or not. And then reiterate it once you've picked your team. It's a tricky sort of slope, but this team meeting, you need to be able to go, righto, attitude, commitment, effort, no brainers, no negotiables. You must tick these boxes or you won't play here. Then you're speaking about roles that we talked about before. I would bring all that up, attitude to practice. I would talk about all that, the team rules I would talk about, which I'll get to in a sec. But I also talk about diet. I talk about conditioning. I talk about injuries. One of my biggest bugbears, and you should all be doing this, is if one of your kids rolls their ankle in phys ed on a Monday morning and your next training is Thursday night and they hobble in at the start of training and tell you that they can't train because they rolled their ankle Monday morning and you're learning about it Thursday, I'd just about go off my head. It's part of our structure that you roll your ankle, the first opportunity you have to just text me to say, look, I've rolled my ankle, I might not be able to train, I'll see how I go. Or I'm on crutches, I can't train, I'm out for whatever. The earliest possibility. Absolutely, non-negotiable. I plan a training for what might be 10 players, and that training plan, obviously, like all of you, would go out the window if we don't know. So the earlier, the better, and that's not something that I just wait for and see and then try and maybe tell the team. No, early team meeting, tell the parents, tell the kids, as soon as you know you might be hurt or might be sick or might be away, I have to know as soon as you know. Team rules, clear and confident. We talked about team rules. So the most important part here is be clear about your penalties. The classic one of, if your kids miss both trainings in a week, they'll miss the game. Just be straight out with it. Be blunt, be honest. Let your parents go, but, and then say, no, this is what it's about and this is what I'm about. We are building a culture here. We're going to stick to our guns and we're going to build it properly. I like to give kids something to take away from this meeting. I know that we use our Facebook groups, and I use a Teamer app, which is really good. I know how many of you use that. It's a really good app to manage the team, day-to-day activities of the team. But if I put up team rules, I don't think it gets read so much. I still like to give them a hard copy of this to try and emphasise that this is really important stuff. It often works with the parents more so than the kids. Really quickly, we do reviews. So once you've done all those things, if you're going to review your kids at mid-season, or for us at seniors, it was 3 times a year after 6, 12, 18 games. If you're going to do reviews on their performance and their, we have KPIs, whatever it might be, use that opportunity to talk about a culture. Use that opportunity to go, by the way, how do you think we're traveling, as a group? Is there a dynamic problem? How do you think we're going? Don't wait. There might be things bubbling in the background that the kids are managing themselves and you just don't see. Give yourself an opportunity to learn about them and bring it up when you're reviewing these kids. Be honest. I've said that enough times. Okay, almost done. So that's just a bit of a review thing about what I think are the important parts about trying to get a good culture up. The balance between being able to push these values forward at the start versus keep on top of them. Yep, have your rules, but make sure you're consistent and fair, and make sure you police them as you go. Be honest, be upfront, be consistent. Stick to your values. Easier said than done, but it's really, really important. It's the point I'm trying to get across more than anything out of this talk. So this is the corny page. You've all probably heard and said things like this and caught yourself saying them, but this is true. There's nothing truer than this, especially with juniors. So use it that way and be upfront. Say it in that meeting that I want to teach your parents, and I've said it myself, I want to teach your kids how to be better people, how to have morals, great ethics, great values in life. I want to make them better people. And I want to make it, and I've said it there, I've challenged kids and I've challenged teams that you might play for another 10 years. And in 10 years' time, when someone asks you about your basketball career, I want you to go, remember that season 10 years ago when Warren was coach and we had this player and we did this and we finished here and we went to this tournament. How much fun was that, or whatever it might be? Challenge them to make this year something really special and put it back on the kids. How are we going to do that? How are we going to make this the most special year you've had? The next coach next year can do it again, but at the end of the day, if you have a crack at it, you might be surprised at how well the kids buy into something like that. Yeah, we know culture over talent. That's really important. But I've been lucky enough, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, that I'm lucky enough to have 5 BigV Championships, and they're highlights, no question. But the example I give to a lot of people when they talk about highlights and ask me about highlights, when I go to a wedding a couple of years ago, because one of my players is getting married that I coached a few years earlier, and her bridal party are all players that she met when she was recruited by us and she came to play at our club. To me, being in that environment and seeing those friendships and those relationships happen is probably worth just as well. It's worth more than all the championships realistically, because that's what we're trying to do here. So it sounds corny, and it is corny, but relationships over championships, I think it's a really important one. And there's a photo there that not all of those kids would probably be friends in that photo, but I can tell you that nearly all those girls along the bottom there are great mates, and Colleen has made some fantastic friends, and all of that group, probably all of that group just about still has time for each other. So it's a really important thing. I got there, Todd, I think.
Fantastic. You can go for another 2 hours if you want this time.
No, that's fine. I hope I didn't rush through some things. I was conscious. I tried not to rush, but I could feel myself probably talking a bit quick. But if anyone's got any questions, happy to try and answer them. It's not a topic that's it's a topic that's very singular. I think everyone's got probably their own beliefs and values, but anyone's got any questions?
Yeah, Warren, I'll kick it off. I'm always happy to ask a question. That was fantastic. Thanks. I like early on you said when it comes to rep, you want to win, and I get that.
Mhm.
And that's the way I try to look at it as well. But would you say, like, I try not to have that conversation with the kids. I try to say to the kids, well, we just need to look after all these things that you talk about, the commitment, the effort, and everything else.
Yeah.
And the wins will come. They may not come straight away, but they'll come if we look after the rest. So you wouldn't be saying to the kids at the start, we want to win.
No, so what I would say is I would make a singular, almost a singular point, but not make it the be all and end all, if that makes a bit of sense. I would make a point at the start of the season that we're trying to build what we think success is. And one of those factors, it's not never going to be a single thing. So one of those factors is going to be, we are going to hit the floor every Friday night and do our best to win every game. And if we do that, there is a goal at the end of it that might involve winning the title, winning the season. But that's probably it. That's probably where you'd leave that. Then you would focus probably more so on the improvements and development of the game and development of a team structure and whatever else you want to do. And your kids will feed into that, a lot. I think kids will often talk about their individual skills, and then a coach can then tie that together to talk about what it means to develop as a group in, basketball ability. I would always, at the start of a season for rep, I would talk about the difference between domestic and rep. To me, is that we are also learning how to be successful. And, it's a bit about, learning how to deal with adversity. There are going to be times where we drive all the way to Frankston on a Friday night and someone doesn't get on the court, or you only get on the court for a couple of minutes or whatever it might be. And it's your ability to deal with that. But really what we're doing is we're going down there to try and win the game. So there is an element of it. I certainly wouldn't shy away from it altogether.
Yep.
But having said that, it probably does depend on the level of the kids and the investment of the kids, how long they've been playing rep. It might be, and forgive me, I don't know what everyone in here coaches or whatnot, but, maybe if it's a lower age group and it's a third or fourth team, maybe you just wouldn't allude to it really at all. So I think first teams probably should make a point of it at some point. But yeah, perhaps as you dial down the teams a little bit, maybe it is a factor more so than a part of your list of goals.
Yeah, thanks. That was really good. Thank you.
Hey, Warren, I've got a question.
Yes, mate.
How important is it for the club's values to align with your values? And has that ever not been the case in the situation you were in?
I've probably been lucky, Sarah, that I've coached at the sort of higher end of things, and it's probably made it a little bit easier for me to, for want of a better term, dictate terms a little bit. But no, it's very important. But you need to be able to mould them together. If they're diametrically opposed, then there's a conversation to be had with, with Cecil or with whoever about what we can do to bring them sort of together, I suppose. I do think it's important that each coach has their own set of values, but I'm not telling you that if I came back to coach juniors at Broady tomorrow, that I wouldn't adhere to what the club values were, but I would have attitude, commitment, effort sort of bolted on the side a little bit and make sure that they are looked after as well. Probably not a great answer, but it's important to make sure that kids can move up through the age groups and up through teams and not be confused by moving, from one point to another point, really drastically. So, and it'll happen from purely basketball strategy and structure. They'll be running this offense in 14s and suddenly in 16s, they might be doing something different. So it's going to happen anyway. So if the foundations of culture are really strong, then it's important that they have that foundation. I don't think realistically, there's nothing really left of center in attitude, commitment, and effort. I think that's stuff that's pretty, no matter what it's called, you can sort of mold it in.
There's a question in the chat, if I can get that for you, if no one else has got one at the moment. So Hannah's asking, and I think it's a bit of a plug as well, because we are replaying this game on Tuesday night, the 2009 grand final.
Yes.
Can you maybe just talk a little bit about the ups and downs of that? Because that was, I think, double digits down to double digits up kind of situation.
How long you got? I could probably do a play-by-play. I've watched that last game so many times.
Well, I think, was there ever a point where you maybe thought it was too far gone?
Yeah, there was 15 points down with 2 minutes to go or a minute and a half to go in the third quarter. And at that stage, I didn't know that Shaz had torn her quad. I didn't know that after the game. So I was a little bit nervous, I'll be honest, but you sort of, I think we scored at the end of that. So we were 13 down at three-quarter time in a game that, you were hoping that we were 19 points up in the second quarter. So we just stopped playing completely. I think at the end of the day, you had a team with not just Sharon and Frog, but Kate Hogan and Lauren Bennett and Lisa Troyan and Tennille Can and these girls running around that were, you kind of felt like if any team could dig our way out of this, it would be this team. And I think every play in that last quarter, if Frog and Shaz didn't touch the ball in every single play, I'd be surprised. But it was, that last quarter was, I think I've even got this last quarter saved on my phone. It's just one of those things that I can't get away from. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah. So sorry for the spoiler alert. Anyone's watching on Tuesday, we do get up at the end, but
Won't say by how much.
Yeah, Tuesday night on Facebook and YouTube that'll be out. So that's probably the best one we've had so far. So definitely jump in and watch that. If anyone else got any other questions, feel free to unmute or throw it in the chat.
Yeah, question, Todd.
Hi, Cecil.
Hello, Warren. Thanks for your time.
No worries.
Resources are always a major issue for most junior associations. And knowing that we have to have parents coach. Any advice to our coaches who are parents coaching their own kids?
Yeah, look, it's a really it's a super challenge, isn't it? I think the best way, and I've been in a couple of really small clubs where it was nearly all a couple of where most of the teams were parents realistically right through, and you can see the difference when you don't have people, like yourself or like Glenn or like people around the club to fall on and help out. To me, some of the things that I would have touched on in the talk were, for example, the team rules only have 2 or 3 team expectations, only have 2 or 3 rules, fall on some other coaches to try and help build them. And yeah, look, you're right. Resources are really tough, but it's often, one thing I will say, it's really hard to then just go onto, a lot of parent coaches will jump onto YouTube, find a drill, think, fantastic, without realizing that that's a drill that probably works really well in a college situation where you're training 19 times a week, stuff like that. So there are some really good basic resources around that I know that we would probably have access to help. But all I could ever say to parents who are coaches is speak up and be connected. Be connected to your director of coaching and be connected to your other club coaches. And even if you can't just be connected to other parents who are coaching and feed off them. Otherwise, it becomes a real drain, and it's never easy to coach. I mean, I've thankfully never done it, and I've seen some really good versions of parents coaching their kids, and I've also seen some pretty ugly ones as well. So it's a really slippery slope, I can understand, but as connected as I can be to the people in your position, Cecil, and the Paz and Clarissa and everybody else involved, the better it's going to be.
Might be it. Last chance. All right, now we might wrap it up. That's thank you, Warren. That was fantastic, and some stuff that we don't often really spend a lot of time on. Often when we talk about coaching, it's X's and O's and planning and things like that. So some of that's not focused on, but really, really important. And we'll make sure we've got this recorded. We'll get it up on YouTube, and all the coaches that weren't here, I think it'd be a really good one to go back and watch. So Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, no worries.